Take it away, Polly.
Thank you. Hang on one second. Let's go back to using the stylus. Still working through the kinks of using this thing. And I'll share my screen. All right. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep, things are very tiny.
I know, I'm going to zoom in. So I spent some time exploring ways to add the type selector option. And I've gone through several iterations, including down here. Actually, this is the selector. So I started out experimenting with different ways to present the select type button. I explored a lot of different styles, going with an actual button, going with a drop down, exploring various options, and chatted with Gabe some yesterday. And I know that you had also echoed this previously, Donald, that it's beneficial from an engineering standpoint to have consistency in the create view and the detail view or view version of the page. So now I'm exploring going with more of an explicit title and then perhaps select button. But then once you have applied something, you know, it would look a bit more like this, because we're not giving them the option to go back and change initially, at least for MVC, from one type to another. So any questions or concerns about just kind of going with an approach that's a bit more like this? I'm still kind of thinking through details of it, but I'm leaning towards something a bit more like that now, as opposed to the not having a title layout that we had over here. Part of also what I was striving to accomplish with the view that had the select type, like over here, and add assignee, and this is probably a bit more for Marchand, was that I was looking to be a bit more instructive and offer a bit more guidance to the user as to what to do. So I'm hoping that this helps to kind of address both problems, and that we have some language that gives them guidance, but then we also hopefully have a bit more consistency in the UI, so that hopefully it's a little easier from an engineering standpoint to create and not have to apply all of these exceptions. Something else that I am also proposing is that currently our radio buttons look a bit more like this in the product, but I'm going to propose that we go with something that's a bit more like this, particularly for mobile. So it would have a selected state that would maybe be like a solid background. I think that's a little easier in a mobile setting in particular to quickly identify what has been selected, as opposed to just a tiny radio button. So that's something else that I'm looking into, and I'll provide the specific details of the styles related to those and annotations separately.
Holly, what's the process look like for that? When you say proposing it, is that proposing it to the foundations team for a change within pajamas, or proposing it for the pattern we're going to use within work items?
That is a very good question. It's kind of both, but because this is a new pattern, foundations will need to be looped in. I don't really know that they're going to push back too much, but they might. So my proposal is definitely for the group, but then separately I will need to include them in that conversation, just so that they know that this is what I'm suggesting. And then also I have to talk about why. Of course, I'm not looking to use an existing pattern. Again, if we find that for whatever reason the foundations team has strong concerns and we need to go back to more of a radio button approach, I'm not thinking that it's going to be a critical negative impact on the user experience if we go with traditional radio buttons. I just think that it's maybe not quite as clear. So I don't mind, adapting the current standard if they prefer for MVC, and then exploring ways to maybe improve that experience for mobile in the future. Does that answer the question? Summary is yes for this. Yes for foundations, but then also the foundations, if they push back a lot or if they have strong concerns, maybe from an accessibility standpoint, then I will at that point be content to roll back to more of a traditional radio button if we need to.
I have a question. So Holly, on the type selector, when that kind of like, which looks very nice, by the way. So
You're talking about this view?
yeah.
Okay.
So you tap, like, I guess you tap select type on the sort of initial form, and then this opens up, and then you can choose which of the types you want.
Mhm.
What will this look like on desktop? Like, would you expect the same behavior, or would it just be a drop down? I'm just curious.
That's actually a great question as well. And something that I forgot to mention is in this view, the thought is that you open up this view, which in mobile environment would be like a panel that overlays. You select maybe feature, and then it would apply and close. I'm still thinking through like the consequences of that, because I do wonder if it puts people in a difficult situation where they may have selected the wrong thing and didn't realize it, but they do have confirmation on this screen as to what they've selected on this view here. So I'm not as concerned about that. In a desktop setting, I have not created that design yet, so I haven't fully thought through it, but the proposal for desktop previously has been that these elements would all function very similarly. It would just be in kind of like a little popover box. So I would expect it to be the same in that case. It would just be a popover as opposed to a full screen overlay like it is in mobile. And I'm happy to show the prototype if that would be helpful as well.
I don't specifically need to see the prototype. I think I get it. That sounds good. And then a second question with regards to, and feel free to tell me that this is like we're designing for the MVC and just not going past that. Curious about a environment where we might have, if there's a situation where there are dozens of types, would we put like a search for the type that you want? Like, hopefully that's not the case, right? Like ideally we don't have users making, hundreds of different types and creating them, but yeah, I'm curious, would we need to do that? Like, would we need to have like some sort of filtering for the types themselves when you're selecting them?
I think that's a great
Exactly,
question. That might be something Gabe would want to comment on as well, but I think the long-term vision for it is that they can create their own types. Is that correct, Gabe? In which case there could be any potential number, I would imagine. And a search makes sense to me in that situation to offer some filtering.
I doubt people are going to have more than 20 types max ever. Could be wrong, but
20 is still a fairly significant number to have to scroll through. So
yeah.
From an engineering standpoint, once these decisions are finalized, and I say that pretty confidently because they're very minor changes, in my opinion, from what was originally proposed. And I definitely don't see pushback necessarily from foundations for these proposals. It's just maybe the challenge of whether or not we go with the sort of blue highlighted box versus this box. What would be beneficial to you, the engineers, in terms of documentation for me to get this to you? How can I communicate this to you in the best way that would be most valuable for you?
From our side, I think just we can update the designs within the design issue, and then we'll just add a comment or description or something in the description for some of the like the crate issue or the crate feature issue and the view feature issue, saying that, hey, these designs have changed, please revisit. I put a comment in the Zoom chat, but it would also be helpful if you showed this tomorrow in our plan weekly. Just, I think there's more participants there, and then we might be able to get real-time feedback from the people that are at that meeting. Other than that, I think that's from our side, that's probably all we need. If there's any like acceptance criteria that needs to be changed off of the designs, which I don't think there are because we're not really changing functionality, but we can go ahead and change that after the designs are finalized.
Okay, I'm making a note. So I am happy to update the view issue, the create issue, and then I also had that sort of overall MVC1 design issue. So I'll update all of them with the final proposal. And then I'm happy to present tomorrow as well, just to get everybody up to speed. That's all I had. Anyone else have any other questions?
So you were thinking about these text-related questions. Are you like, how can I help? Like, are you still deciding, or are you going to share it with other people?
I would love your thoughts at any given moment. So if you see anything here that you would like to change, like this verbiage, for example, that's associated with each of these items, I pulled from an issue that we have in place currently for issue types. I think maybe myself or Gabe wrote this up at some point. It almost certainly needs to be revisited and maybe cleaned up and tweaked a little bit. So any thoughts you have on that? Any thoughts you have on the micro copies, such as the verbiage surrounding kind of instructing the user in this create state? Any thoughts that you have surrounding those, I would love to hear. And Marcia, I'll tag you in those issues as well if you want to comment there, or you're welcome to comment in the Figma file as well. And I'm happy to tag you in that too, if you have a preference.
Cool. Do it. I don't know, issue, or what's the closest to the, I guess you start working in Figma, so Figma is fine.
I do, but it's probably beneficial for other folks to see the conversation too. So I'll just put it in the issue if that works for you. And then I'll also, I'm happy to reference the Figma file in case you want to jump in there too, but might be better for us to have that discussion in the issue just so everybody else can be on the same page.
Sounds good.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Anyone have anything else? We'll cut out early if not.
Yeah,
Press the wrong button.
anything